Just taking a bit of a stroll on my school's field. So we're in the middle of an activities week. What that means is that regular teaching timetables have been collapsed and we've been doing various worthy activities. And because today is a lovely June day, and we've just had all the people in with the big industrial mowers, you can smell the cut grass. And if that isn't a hint of what the poem's about, I don't know what is. I appreciate that so far, if you've been following this series, you might think that I've got mowing on the mind, and maybe I do, but I love it as a companion piece to the mower. And obviously cut grass is so totally different, even though it does deal with some very similar topics and obviously a very similar concept. And yet it's such a lyric poem in comparison to the mower. Both of them, though, are short, both of them are concise, and yet both of them still have such power to them. So, as you can hear, I'm a long way away from the children kicking around footballs in the distance, but I am stood here among little piles of cut grass which I can smell, and this sort of bittersweet smell which always makes me think of summer, but also, as this poem brilliantly captures, that sense of change, that sense of time. Cut grass lies frail, brief is the breath, mown stalks exhale, long along the death. It dies in the white hours of young-leafed June, with chestnut flowers, with hedges snow-like strewn. White lilac-bowed, lost lanes of Queen Anne's lace, and that high-builded cloud, moving at summer's pace. When thinking of fitting settings for Larkin's poetry, this one was a bit of a doozy, really, because obviously you can have cut grass almost anywhere. I think it's more an abstract poem about a time of year. Certainly, as I walk along this field now, which is pretty hard underfoot, although I remember it didn't feel like that long ago. I stood out here watching a rugby match and my shoes were getting soaked. But you can really get the sense of that high-builded cloud. What a superb little bit of lyricism there as well. It always makes me think of that archaic sound of, instead of saying built or build or, was built, it's builded, which is the same as in William Blake's Jerusalem itself. This sense of, was Jerusalem builded here? And I've always wondered if that was a bit of a cop-out to try and make sure that the meter worked, but who am I to argue with some of the greats? But this high-builded cloud behind me, I guess you would call almost like close to being a mackerel sky, but not quite. You've got this huge band of cloud, seemingly incredibly high up, if that doesn't sound incredibly stupid to say, because obviously it's clouds. But the idea of them just sitting there, moving at summer's pace. I'm going to come back to that line later because I love it so much. Because it is quite abstract and it doesn't follow a story or a narrative of such, it's more of a snapshot of a time of year. This poem has a resonant power about the idea of what the cut grass itself to symbolise, but also it's a poem of senses as much as anything else. So going through this poem, line by line, cut grass lies frail. The sense of something dying or on its way to being dead. It's quite a morbid opening to this summer poem. The idea that the grass that is lying there soon will go brown and dead and will no longer be part of this lovely day that is being illustrated. But it will, of course, smell fantastic. And the idea of that paradoxical sense of something smelling wonderful and something being, created from that we enjoy. This links back with the idea of Larkin's sort of convoluted and complicated relationship with the natural world. Brief is the breath, moan stalks exhale, long, long the death. The enjambment in the poem is almost continuous, really. We do have this entire thought chopped down, if you'll pardon the pun, again and again. So brief is the breath. I guess the word you would use to fill in here is like that moan stalks exhale. And then it's long, long the death, it dies. So we have all of this, it's tangled up and yet then put out into this really, really exquisitely neat set of stanzas. And the idea of this moan stalks exhale. Now, there's obviously the homophone there of stalks, as in to have the stalking of something, almost like a deathly, sinister thing, but also the idea of them exhaling this personification. It's like the dying breath. Yeah, the brief last breath of something being killed. Long, long the death. And then this idea of it dies. So we go from personifying to completely taking it back to what it is. It's grass, you ninny. It's just been mown. So there's a sense of coming back to the overall picture. This picture of the poem itself is so you could say, well, Larkin said that it was pure music, which I think was designed as a bit of a backhanded compliment in the usual self-deprecating way that we would come to expect him talking about his own work. And it is, in a way. It doesn't have a poetic speaker that is obviously there. We don't have a sense of, I see this. But it is beautifully rendered, like a painting that slowly and surely becomes more and more vibrant the more you look at it. The white hours of young-leafed June. White hours. As we've said before, when we think about weather, I first started the very first episode of the series on a really cold, unseasonably cold June morning, literally the 1st of June. And the idea of it being very, very sort of, unseasonable. I always think of June as being like it is today, early 20s. Maybe a bit of cloud cover like we have today, but still the white hours, you get a sense of white hot. But there's a pleasantness about it to a degree. Because June is the month that I always think of as being the month of the promise of summer. When you get through to late August, there is a tiny bit of you that starts to long for the cooler months to come along. And for me, it always starts when I see the grass itself no longer looking green and verdant and just being this yellowy, patchy, sort of baked thing. Obviously, with the way that the seasons have changed over the years, this isn't always the case. But in my mind, June is always the month that I walk out without a jacket, without thinking about it twice. And the times where I've suddenly been surprised be sitting outside, maybe on the grass or maybe in a lovely sort of garden somewhere, and realising that actually, quite warm, this is lovely, this is a nice feeling of summer being there but still being a novelty. So the white hours of young-leafed June. There's those leaves making an appearance again from the trees, and these chestnut flowers with hedges snow-like strewn. Again, this inversion of the seasons, the idea of the snow, but it's only snow-like. And this is unhyphenated, unusually for Larkin. It's only like snow in that it's so ubiquitous, but also that it has a sense of prettiness which you get with snow. And just like real snow, when you get too close to it, when you spend too much time in it, it no longer has its appeal. White lilac-bowed, lost lanes of Queen Anne's lace. Now, I won't lie, when I first read this poem a long time ago, I slightly lost my way with it because I didn't quite know what Queen Anne's lace was. I'm ashamed to admit. I now know, of course, that it is a very, very common wildflower, and I now know that its actual name is Dorcas carota, and it is actually a form of wild carrot, which I did not know. And it's also known as bird's nest, bishop's lace, and of course Queen Anne's lace over here. And yeah, it is this type of wildflower that you only seem to see early on, a bit like how you get the smell of wild garlic in sometimes late May. And I think what he captures here is this moment, this lost lane, these little country lanes that nobody goes down. I used to live not too far away from Woking in a place called Chobham, and one of my many things that I did during the pandemic to keep myself sane was I would often go running down this thing called Penny Pot Lane, and delightfully named, of course, very quintessential. But one thing I noticed, especially when we had very few people out and about in their cars, and it was a very quiet time, 2020, in terms of the people actually being out and about, I remember taking myself down for a run in what was a very hot June, down through Penny Pot Lane, up a couple of really tiny little paths, and being just overwhelmed with, well, Queen Anne's lace, so much of it, that and stinging nettles, of course. But the idea of nature sort of taking over and being there and really thriving, and again, a bit like with the opening of the poem itself and the concept of cutting grass, being mown back so people can see things better. Again, this man intruding on nature, but nature finding its way where it can. And I guess the final line, or the final couple of lines, for me, will always be the ones that will stand out. It's such an incredible image to end on, really. And that high builded cloud moving at summer's pace. There's a huge amount of ambiguity, really, at what that pace actually is. Summer can sometimes feel like it lasts forever. We've all got those endless summers in our minds, usually from our youth. I remember the endless summer of when I left college and I was about to go to university. Felt like every day was nice. Every afternoon was decent. We spent most of our time outdoors, going to various places, able to go to pubs for the first time because we were all 18. And yet, in a way, the concept of summer now feels like my summer holidays are over in a flash. So moving at summer's pace is a gorgeous line. Because when you look up at these clouds, as I am doing right now, you sort of look and you go, well, I know that they're moving. I know they're disappearing in the wind. I know that when I look back here in an hour's time, they'll be gone. But for now, they're sort of staying right where they are. In a way, it has echoes for me of Queen's Days of Our Lives, which is a song that I really find quite emotive. But the idea of when Freddie sings, the days were endless, we were crazy, we were young, the sun was always shining, we just lived for fun. And the idea that our memories aren't always truthful, and summer's pace might well be faster than we actually anticipate. But for now it's right there. And even though the cloud has a sense of it being ominous, maybe the idea of rain or thunder, I hope you've enjoyed this series so far, and I hope that your summers are as long as you wish.